The cowboy lived alone on a small ranch beyond the dry riverbed. Most days began the same way. He woke before the sun, filled a tin cup at the pump, and walked the fence line while the desert light slowly turned the grass from gray to gold. He liked quiet work. He liked to listen to the wind move through the cottonwoods and to the soft sounds of his horses in the corral. People in town knew his name, but they did not know much else. He was a careful man who kept his promises and spoke only when needed. The land had taken much from him, but it had given him one gift that he guarded with all his strength: a sense of peace. One evening, as the sun sank behind the low hills and the sky turned a clear copper color, he saw a figure at the fence. At first he thought it was a tree trunk fallen against the rails, but then the figure shifted and a thin shawl moved in the wind. He walked closer, slow enough not to startle. A woman stood there with an upright posture that suggested both fatigue and pride. She wore a long skirt and a faded shirt. Her hair was tied back with a strip of cloth, and there was dust on her boots. Her eyes were dark and steady. He knew from the beadwork on her shawl and the style of the moccasins tied at her saddle that she was Apache. He stopped a few yards away and lifted his hand in greeting. She did the same. No one spoke at first. The ranch dogs, old and sweet, sniffed the air and wagged their tails. He said he could offer water and bread. She said she would accept the water. Her voice was quiet and even, like someone used to guarding her breath against long roads and long thoughts. He filled a clean dipper at the pump and handed it over the fence. She drank slowly, then held the dipper against her cheek as if the metal itself could draw away the day's heat. He asked if she needed a place to rest. Her eyes measured him. He did not rush her. He added that the barn loft was clean and dry, that she could sleep there if she wished, that he would sleep in the house, and that he would not trouble her. He spoke each detail plainly, as if building a small bridge out of clear planks she could see. She considered this and nodded. He opened the gate and stepped back so she could pass first. She did, walking with a slight stiffness, the kind that comes from old aches that never quite leave. In the barn, he pointed out the ladder, the hay bales, and a small trunk that held a spare quilt and a tin lantern. He told her his name. She told him hers. He said she could come to the porch when she was ready, and there would be bread, beans, and coffee. They ate a quiet supper. The porch boards were warm from the day. Crickets started their slow song. She took small bites and kept her shoulders square. He saw the way she watched his hands, not with fear, but with care, as if reading his intent in every small motion. He kept his hands on the table, relaxed, and spoke about simple things. He said the north fence might need a new post. He said the bay mare had a soft temper but a stubborn streak. He said the well had good water year-round because of the springs under the far hill. She listened and asked 3 questions, each one precise. How old was the mare, whether the springs ever ran muddy, and how far the ranch sat from town. He answered plainly and then asked nothing back. He let the quiet do its work. That night he left a pitcher of water and a wedge of cornbread at the bottom of the loft ladder, then closed the barn door to a respectful crack. In the house he read a few pages from a worn book of travel notes. He did not sleep quickly. He listened to the wind lift and fall and to the barn's soft creaks as it settled. He felt not worry, but a kind of watchfulness that came from sharing a space with someone he did not know yet and wanted to treat rightly. At dawn he saddled the gray gelding and began his rounds. He checked the south pasture where the calves nosed the dew-wet grass. When he returned to the yard, he found the woman already up. She had swept the porch, set the coffee to boil, and was standing by the corral with a length of rope in her hand. The bay mare had danced at the sight of the rope, ears forward, then back, then forward again. The woman spoke to the mare in low phrases, not a language he knew but a tone he recognized. Calm, patient, steady. After a few minutes, the mare dropped her head and let the rope touch her neck. The woman did not pull. She waited. The horse breathed out and stepped closer. The woman smiled, small and real, and the cowboy felt something ease in his chest that he had not noticed was tight. He thanked her for the coffee and for helping with the mare. She said she liked work. He said there was plenty to share if she wished. Mending a strap, oiling the saddle, checking the chicken coop for broken boards. She agreed. They made a plan with simple lines. She would keep her space in the loft. He would leave fresh water by the ladder. They would share meals on the porch when it suited them both. No questions were required and no stories needed to be offered until they were ready to be told. By mid-morning the sun was high, and the air carried that clean, dry smell that makes everything feel honest. They worked side by side without much talk. He saw the care she took with his tools and the way she set each one back in its place. He noticed how she spared the chicken's sharp movements and how the nervous one settled when she passed. When he lifted a feed sack, she steadied the other end with a quick hand, and they managed it together with a rhythm that felt natural. In the afternoon, he rode into town for salt, lamp wicks, and a small bag of coffee beans. She said she would stay and mend a bridle if he wished. He said that would help. In town, he felt the shift in the air as a few men on the porch of the store watched him tie off his horse. One tipped his hat in a way that felt like a question. Another man asked, light and careless, whether he had company out at his place. The cowboy said he had a guest who worked hard and treated his horses well. He said it in that even tone he used when fence posts needed setting, calm and not open to debate. He bought what he came for and left without more talk. When he reached home, the bridle lay in neat coils with the stitching clean and firm. On the porch sat 2 tin cups and a small plate of sliced apples, which must have come from the little tree near the chicken yard that he had nearly forgotten would bear fruit this year. The woman sat with her back to the railing, knees folded sideways, sunlight on her hair. She asked how town was. He said town was town. She smiled at that and passed him a cup. For a few days they kept that simple pattern. The work was good, and so was the quiet. He found that he wanted to offer small things that made her day easier without asking for anything back. An extra bar of soap left near the pump, a clean needle stuck into a cork on the table, a blank page and a pencil in case she liked to draw or list supplies. She used the needle and the soap and left the pencil where it was. He took that as a gentle line she was not ready to cross, and he respected it. On the 4th day, the sky gathered itself into a storm. You could smell it before you saw it, that sharp scent that means rain is coming fast. He looked up from the trough and saw the clouds roll in, silver at the edges, dark at the center. The wind picked up. The calves called for their mothers, and the herd began to shift. He knew the low spot near the north fence could turn slick and dangerous in sudden rain, and he headed there at once. She was already moving, looping a gate open to give the animals a safer path to higher ground. They did not shout. They did not rush. They kept to clean hand motions and the sure kind of steps that come from experience. When the first heavy drops fell, she covered the lantern with her shawl and the flame held. He noted how she checked the posts with her palm and kept to the fence's safe side. In less than an hour, the worst had passed. The air turned cool and sweet. The sky split open into a pale blue. They stood breathing by the high gate. Her hair was damp and clung to her jaw. His shirt was stuck to his back. The calves settled into quiet. The woman looked at him in the softer light that follows rain. She said thank you. Not for any one thing, but for everything, the space, the work, the kindness that did not. Morning came soft and pale, with a slow light that made the wet grass shine. The cowboy rose early as always, thinking of small tasks and simple plans for the day. He found the woman already at the pump, washing her hands with care, the steam of the coffee rising from the porch table behind her. She turned and met his eyes without hurry. Today, she said in a clear voice, would be a day for truth. He nodded and did not step closer. He only said he would be near if she needed anything, and that he would listen in the way she liked him. To listen, without pushing, without asking more than she wanted to give. They took their coffee at the corral rail. There was a comfortable distance between them, the kind that did not feel cold but safe. She spoke first about the easy things, the bay mare's gentle mood after the rain, the lamb she had heard bleating, by the far fence the sound of water moving in the arroyo. Then her words slowed, and she drew a breath and let it go. She held out her hands, palms up, and showed him small healed marks near her fingers and the inside of her wrists, places where long work had rubbed and left a map of old effort. She explained the marks were from years of lifting, sewing, gathering, and sometimes holding on through hard weather. She did not say this with sadness. She said it as a person might name things on a trail. There is a stone, there is a plant, there is a bend in the path. He said thank you for sharing that part of her road. He did not reach for her hands. He kept his own hands around his cup, letting the warmth steady him. She nodded once and spoke of other marks, not on skin. They were the kind that live inside, a person, and show themselves in careful habits, checking a door twice, sleeping lighter than most, knowing where the nearest water is without thinking. She had left her home at a time when leaving was the only way to keep hope alive. There had been winters that bit deep, and lean seasons that taught her to count and save. There had been loss she would not describe with details. The cowboy did not ask for those details. He understood that the most faithful listener is the one who lets silence carry what cannot be said. When she finished, he said only that he would stand by the promise he made on the night of the storm. He would not leave because of truth, and he would not measure her worth by what had hurt her. He told her what it had been like after the fever took his family, how the house had felt too large and too quiet, how the ranch had given him work that kept him steady. He said he had not shown his scars either, but he would not hide the fact that they existed. He looked toward the hills and added that peace is something a person builds with slow hands, not something that falls from the sky. They worked then, because work has a way of holding a person up when feelings run wide. She mended a halter and checked every stitch. He brought in kindling and stacked it so each piece could dry well. When noon came, they ate beans and biscuits on the porch. The air smelled like sun-warmed wood. He told her about the town and the storekeeper who had made a small, sharp comment last trip. She listened and said she was used to being watched, but she would not carry anyone's bitterness. He agreed and said that on the next trip, he would buy supplies from the other shop down the road, the one with the kind old clerk who wrapped eggs in soft wool from a basket on the counter. That afternoon, a wagon rattled up the lane. The pastor's wife sat on the bench seat with a little basket covered by a clean cloth. Behind her, a boy held a small lamb that shook its head and bleated with a thin sound. The woman lifted her hand in greeting and called out that the lamb had eaten poorly since the storm and would not stop crying. The cowboy stood back and let the Apache woman walk to the wagon. She took the lamb and held it against her chest, one hand under its jaw, one on its side. She spoke to it in a gentle voice that had no hurry in it. After a moment, she asked for a bit of warm milk and a soft rag. The pastor's wife said she had both in the basket. Together they fed the lamb with the rag dipped in milk, a slow drip to the tongue, and the lamb, after a stubborn minute, began to swallow. The boy's eyes went bright. The pastor's wife exhaled and touched the Apache woman's shoulder lightly, a respectful, grateful touch. Before they left, the pastor's wife set the basket on the porch and said it held bread and 2 jars of preserves, and also a note with a prayer for anyone who wanted it, and also nothing more than neighborly goodwill. The Apache woman said, "Thank you," in simple words that meant more than the words themselves. News traveled, as it does. The person at the post office heard the lamb had lived, and the woman at the sewing shop heard the cowboy paid fair wages to the hand who watched the herd when he rode out. There were still stares from some, but there were also nods now, and the young teacher asked the Apache woman if she might come to the little school one morning to show the children how to braid rope with patience. The woman said she would think on it, and later she agreed because teaching is another way to make a place feel like home. On the first market day after the storm, the cowboy and the Apache woman loaded a few calves into a neighbor's wagon and went to town together. They stood at the pen and waited for the buyer. The buyer was a traveler who liked to push for a low price with a quick tongue. He pointed at a scar on one calf's leg and said the animal would not bring much weight. The Apache woman asked him to check the gait. She had cleaned and wrapped that leg herself, and she knew the calf's step had steadied. The buyer laughed lightly and looked away. She did not push back with her tone. She pushed back with facts. She explained feed costs, the calf's true age and expected growth, and the right price if both sides wanted to walk away satisfied. The buyer listened because numbers have a way of asking for respect. He made a better offer. She stayed quiet and lifted one eyebrow toward the cowboy, letting him have the last word. He named a fair number. The buyer paused, then stuck out his hand and agreed. A few people near the pen looked surprised. The cowboy and the woman did not gloat. They simply wrote the sale in a small notebook and went to buy salt and flour. Back at the ranch, the days began to shape themselves into a pattern that felt strong and kind. She moved from the loft into the small spare room in the house at her own pace with her own rules. He fixed the window so it opened smooth and replaced the latch on the door with one that clicked shut and stayed shut when asked. He set a small table in the room with a bowl she could fill with what she liked. River stones, a paper flower someone once gave her, a ribbon with beadwork that had belonged to her mother. She did not fill the bowl at once. She did it slowly, one thing at a time, like a person trusting herself to settle. In the evenings, they read aloud. He had travel notes and a thick book about plants. She brought out a notebook she had kept for years with songs written in careful lines and small drawings of birds in the margins. Sometimes she sang low, just to the edge of a tune, and the cattle in the far field stood quiet. He learned a few of the words and hummed along in a way that pleased her. They did not name what they were building. They did not need to. It was visible in the way he left the porch light burning a little longer when she walked up from the barn, and in the way she set an extra cup on the table when she brewed tea, in case he came in from the yard thirsty. When the next letter from the Cattle Association came, the cowboy read it twice and frowned. A rule had changed for the annual branding mark, and he would need to register a new sign for the ranch gate. He told the Apache woman over dinner. She only said, "What will you call it?" He stared at his plate and then at the door and then at the empty gate beyond it. He asked what she would call it. She thought a moment and said a name that joined the river to the hills. A simple, two-part name that sounded right in the mouth and right in the heart. He smiled and nodded. The next day he rode to the clerk and wrote the new name on the form with a firm hand. On the ride home his chest felt light. They made the sign together out of a plank of cedar that had seasoned in the shed for years. She drew the letters with a soft pencil. He carved them with slow, careful strokes. She sanded the edges until the wood felt like a smooth stone. He sealed it with oil that smelled like orange peel. When they hung the sign at the gate, they stood back without words. The letters caught the afternoon light. It did not say husband and wife. It did not say partner and owner. It said caretakers. It said two people who agreed to share the work and the peace and the road ahead. One evening, as summer edged toward fall, a small group from town came to the ranch with baskets of food and a tin coffee pot. The pastor's wife was there and the teacher and the old clerk from the shop with the wool for eggs. They did not come to pry. They came to share a simple supper and to listen to the wind in the cottonwoods. The Apache woman set out extra plates and made a stew that smelled like sage and onion. The cowboy brewed coffee and sliced a cake the teacher had brought. They all ate and spoke of calves, of schoolyard games, of rain that might come next week. No one asked about the woman's past. No one asked about the cowboy's losses.